Yeah, I don't think Mother knew about this.
Uncle Marvin was strangled by his own beard.
Yeah, you never saw it coming.
And welcome to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Well, you know, I was looking at the schedule as we've been loading old episodes onto our shiny new website, the ExtremeGenes.com site, and I noticed we hadn't had CeCe Moore on here since like November. So CeCe Moore is back on the show today for 2 segments. We're going to talk about surprises today from DNA, and I'm going to put it to her about surprises she may have found in her own family and see if we can get her to cough something good up. So we'll see how it goes coming up here in just a little bit. Hey, if you haven't seen our new website yet, you got to check it out. By the way, we're offering brand new courses in basic genealogy and genetic genealogy. So if you want to know how to do the DNA thing, to use those matches to get your breakthroughs, identify birth parents, confirm your paper trail, all those kinds of things, check it out at ExtremeGenes.com. Right now, it's time to head out to Boston, Massachusetts, where the chief is standing by, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and American Ancestors.org. Hello, David.
How are you, sir?
I am well, thank you. Although my eyes are a little blurry from putting all these old episodes into our site. It takes about 3 minutes a piece, and there were only almost 400 episodes. So it's done, but I'm resting this week, the rest of the weekend. Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
That's going to give a lot of content for people to spend the colder months going through when they say, well, there's nothing on TV, but wait, there's
Wait a
Extreme
minute.
Genes.
Well, and you know, the thing is, of course, the episodes are all up in the usual places, iHeartRadio and what they called iTunes, you know, Apple Media and TuneIn Radio, all these great places. But what those don't have are the transcripts. And we have a great transcriber over in South Africa who's been doing this for us for many years now. And we wanted to make sure that all of her great work is searchable online. So the shows are all searchable because of the transcripts. And then you can follow along with it, too, as you listen to the show once in a while. So check it out at ExtremeGenes.com under Podcast Archive. So, David, what kind of family histoire news do you have for us today?
Oh, I get one. Cemeteries have gone to the dogs in Massachusetts, and I mean that literally. The First Church in Jamaica Plain are the owners of an old colonial cemetery. It used to be part of Roxbury, a town in the suburbs of Boston, and now, well, apparently for a while, they have used it as a dog park.
What?
Yeah. A dog park. Yeah. So all of those old gravestones could be targeted, if you will, for watering. We're hoping that this might change, but it's kind of sad to think that an old cemetery, I mean, I am a trustee of my local cemetery, and we don't allow people to walk their dogs in it for that very reason. But for then to allow it to be used for a dog park, not feeling too comfortable about that, especially since it's a historic cemetery.
So as you're talking, David, I'm going online, and I see that this is not the only place. There's another cemetery in Savannah, Georgia, that is used as a dog park. They say, yes, dog friendly.
I hope this doesn't become a new trend. I mean, there has to be some extra green space or parks that can be utilized that just don't happen to have dead people in it as well. Maybe I'll put a sign next to my gravestone, please don't curb your dog.
Here's another one, the Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Bring Fido. That's the name of the website that's actually listing cemeteries you can take your dog to.
Great.
And they say here, dog walking at the cemetery is permitted by membership only. It's annual and runs from March 1st through the last day of February the following year.
Well, you learn something new every day.
You know, if I were a politician, I don't think I'd want to be buried at a place where people could bring their dogs.
Crazy. And some cemeteries are in tough shape as it is with vandalism and Mother Nature. Speaking of Mother Nature, my next story for Family History News goes a little deeper, 12,000 plus feet in the middle of the Atlantic there, the Titanic graveyard of so many people who went down in 1912. the Titanic herself is actually deteriorating faster than they thought due to salt water and bacteria. They're now sending expeditions out every year to look at the Titanic just to keep track of the deterioration.
Isn't it crazy that Robert Ballard finds this in the mid-'80s in pretty darn good shape? And now here it is. It's been 40 years since then, and it's just absolutely deteriorating at this quick rate. It makes you wonder, what has changed?
I know. I mean, it's almost like she's been found and now she's ready to disappear to the ages. You know? Well, archaeologists never cease to amaze me. And, you know, there are always some weird finds here, there, and everywhere. But we did talk about a city that had an underwater port near Alexandria, Egypt. Yeah. And now this archaeological site is bearing fruit, literally. 2,400-year-old fruit found in wicker baskets. I'm not sure I'd want to eat it because that's really over-fermented.
Even if it's discounted?
Well, maybe if it's discounted. It comes with a free 2,400-year-old basket. I can have that. That would be
something
great.
Like that, yeah. That's an amazing story.
Well, you just never know what you're going to find floating around in the ocean. Just want to tell you that findmypast.co.uk has exciting news, Scottish news that is. You can find parish births and baptisms from 1564 to 1929, marriages and marriage bans 1561 to 1893, and parish deaths and burials 1564 to 2017. This was recently released this summer as news from Find My Past. Exciting news for those with Scottish ancestry. Well, that's about all I have from Beantown this week. And don't forget, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, you can use the coupon code EXTREME and save $20 at AmericanAncestors.org.
All right, David. David Allen Lambert, of course, from Boston, and we'll have him back at the end of the show for more of Ask Us Anything. And coming up next, the amazing CeCe Moore, the DNA detective. And you know, we have not had her on since November. And since she's always up to so many incredible new things, I thought we'd get her on for a couple of segments. I'm going to talk to her today about surprises, by the way, because if anybody has found surprises in DNA, it would be CeCe Moore. Maybe she's even found something in her own family. So let's see what she's got to say about that. It's all coming up when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. Hey Genies, our sponsors at Ancestry have big news. They've completely redesigned the Ancestry mobile app. Now more than ever, the Ancestry app is your Genie travel companion. Check out their new photo line feature where your photos are turned into an amazing collage you can share on social media. Under Discover, check out your daily picks that shows you the most relevant hints to your research and stories and photos that may be on other people's family trees. You can also click on Pick Up Where You Left Off to see the last person you are working on. And all of this works in sync with your desktop at home. And in sync with newspapers.com, find out what happened on this day in history. And if you want to know what happened on a given day in your family history, use the new widget, Events in Your Family Tree, that gives you ancestral birth dates, death anniversaries, and wedding anniversaries. Plus, check out the Maps feature that ties to your family history. Download the new Ancestry mobile app today. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
All right, Genies, we are back at it on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show at extremegenes.com. And it has been a while, a little bit too long, since we last talked to my good friend from Parabon, CeCe Moore, the genetic genealogist. CeCe, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me. I can't believe it's been so long. It feels like it was just a few weeks ago.
Well, I've been loading these old episodes back onto our brand new Extreme Genes website. I'm working backwards, and I found the last time you were on was like November. And it's like, that's not possible.
I can't believe it.
I know.
I guess 21 is already more than half over, which seems just impossible.
I know. Well, I was thinking about you the other day because, we read about surprises and we know that the overwhelming majority of DNA test results do not result in a surprise. But that's why when a surprise does happen, it's kind of a shocker in many cases. And I thought, well, there's nobody who's had more surprises than CeCe Moore and all your research in crime and adoptions and everything else that you do. So my question for you to start out with, at least, is have you ever had a surprise in your own family?
Well, for the longest time, I would always say, no, it's odd. Everyone around me has had all of these surprises. I'm constantly dealing with other people's unexpected surprises, but I hadn't had any in my own family. I thought it was a little boring, but I had my own surprise. I was thinking it was boring. Maybe I should have just thought it was a good thing, because once you do have it, you realize how emotionally disconcerting it can be for yourself and other family members. And so although I'm happy to have a long-time mystery in my family resolved, it's a very difficult thing for the family to deal with.
I'll bet. So is this something that you can give us some details on?
Well, I've never shared it with anyone outside my immediate family before, but I guess it's about time. It's certainly an interesting story. I grew up hearing that my maternal aunt had a baby possibly kidnapped at birth.
Oh, wow.
So any of us involved in adoption have probably heard this story where a mother-to-be is put under during labor, and she wakes up and is told her child died. But yet they are unwilling to supply that child's remains for burial and a funeral. And I had heard this as long as I can remember. And I think it's something I've carried with me all these years, and has probably impacted my work to a certain degree. But we never knew for sure. Did it really happen? She believed very strongly that it had. My grandparents felt that it had happened, but we just didn't have any evidence or any way to unravel it. My aunt had tried to do it herself. Her oldest daughter had researched it. I've been researching it for a couple decades with no success.
Wow.
And so it's been this thing in my family that maybe I have a first cousin out there, an unknown first cousin. We all got tested, my aunt and all her children and all my family, and kind of hoped maybe somehow that would lead to resolving this mystery, but we didn't even know if it really happened, so it's a very difficult thing to research.
But what's so amazing about this is the career path you took was perfect for this kind of research. It involved a family, it involved DNA, and involved potentially a crime. Amazing. I mean, who better to look for this than you?
Yeah, but I don't even look at my own results hardly ever. I'm so busy working on everybody else's results that I rarely even peek at my own. But I was putting a PowerPoint together for something and needed an example. And so, of course, I went into my own account to do that. And I noticed a match I hadn't seen before that shared quite a bit of DNA with me. Not so much that I thought, oh, there's a adoption in my immediate family, but enough that it caught my eye. So how could this person be related? I found that this person also matched my mother's side. And then when I ran shared matches and looked at genetic networks, I saw that this person actually matched both of my mother's parents' sides, which was very odd.
Wow.
So my grandmother's 100% Finnish, and my grandfather had deep roots in the United States, going all the way back to Jamestown. So these are really diverse families, and yet this new match was sharing DNA with both my Finnish relatives and my Proctor relatives. So, my mom only has one sister. She had 3 siblings that died right at birth or shortly thereafter. So at first I'm thinking, wait, did one of those siblings actually survive?
Okay.
No. So it has to be through my aunt, because that's her only surviving sibling that lived to be old enough to have children. So then I thought, well, maybe one of my first cousins placed a child for adoption. That didn't seem to be the case.
It sounds to me like you were kind of avoiding the obvious question in your own mind as you were going through this.
Yeah, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. It was obviously the first thing I thought when I realized this person shared DNA with both my grandmother and grandfather, but I wanted to rule out all the other possibilities.
Sure. It's a natural thing to do, but you would also probably look at this and think, almost too good to be true for kind of a family myth that may or may not be the truth.
Yeah, and this person was very young, only about 20. And so this would be a number of generations removed. So it wasn't really obvious. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't quite figure it out. So I reached out to this person and got his family tree information. I built it out. None of it matched my family. And I asked him if he would allow me to view his Ancestry DNA results, and he did.
Okay.
And so I started grouping everything, and I found that I could connect to his mom's side, but not his father's side. So what's going on there?
Okay.
So I built a genetic network that connected to my family, one that connected to a French-Canadian family, and then one that connected to a Moore family, not related to my Moores. And I built those out and found that one of them connected to my aunt's former husband.
That was your aha moment then.
Well, it was, except that she had 2 other children with that husband. So I thought, well, maybe one of them placed a child for adoption still, right?
Yep.
But then I traced that last genetic network down to a woman in Washington State who married a man born on the exact date my aunt had always said her child was born. And when I pulled up his picture, he had bright red hair, just like her daughter from that same marriage, who would be this child's full sibling. And unfortunately, we missed him by 2 years. So what I pulled up was his obituary. And it gave his date of birth. It had his picture. It was very clear to me that he was my aunt's missing child.
Oh, wow.
So this was actually 2 mysteries in one, because the person who originally matched me, turned out his father was not his biological father.
Okay.
So I not only solved our family mystery, I opened up a new unexpected surprise for him and had to break it to him that his biological father was actually my first cousin once removed that I'd never met, because it was the son of this missing child.
Oh, wow. That's the worst, though, isn't it, to have to tell somebody their dad wasn't their dad?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've done it many times before, but this was different. It's my own family.
Yeah.
And it is my aunt's great-grandson who had just had his own child, so it meant she had a great-great-grandchild. So she had 3 grandchildren she never knew. She had great-grandchildren and even great-great-grandchildren.
Wow.
When I told my aunt this news, unfortunately, the timing wasn't great because her oldest daughter was dying from Lou Gehrig's disease. And I had to tell her I found her son, but he was also deceased. And then my aunt caught COVID and ended up passing away without being able to meet any of these new family members, her grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchild. So it's pretty devastating, actually.
Wow.
You know,
I mean, the timing on all of this is just horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I personally have been searching for this person for 20 plus years. It's one of the first things I tried to do when I got involved in genealogy. but I didn't know if the date of birth was going to be right, if they had changed it because child had been stolen from her. I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. They had said it was a boy that died, but we didn't know if they changed the gender. I've seen that in so many cases I've worked where mothers have been told their child died and in the wrong gender. They changed the date of birth slightly. And little did I know he was out there with that exact date of birth, with that bright red hair that would have given him away if I could have found him sooner. I mean, it's good in a way to resolve, but it's also pretty devastating. I mean, that's why I haven't posted about it. I haven't talked about it. I haven't introduced my new family members on social media yet or anything, because it's all happened at once and it's been a lot to deal with.
Well, with all the surprises you've dealt with others, how has this impacted you?
Tough. And it's really not about me.
I know, but you're the one who found this and solved this within your own family, and suddenly it's much more personal than anything else you would have done professionally.
Yeah, and I'm used to, having some emotional distance. As much as I care about the people I help, I have to keep some emotional distance to be able to do what I do.
Of course.
It's an odd situation because I had to tell somebody their father wasn't their biological father. And then I had to explain to this family that their father was kidnapped from my aunt at birth. Then they asked me how I figured that out. So I had to explain that one of them had a child they didn't know about, which normally I'm not in that position. I usually have the person whose DNA it is do the reaching out. And I had to explain. They said, well, none of us have DNA tested and none of our children have DNA tested. So how'd you find us? Well.
Oh, boy.
So it hit me harder than I thought. I wanted this solved for my whole life. I've lived with it my whole life as long as I can remember. I would think I would be more happy about it, but it's pretty devastating. It's devastating to miss him. It's devastating for his full siblings that never got to meet him, and then their mother died. So it's pretty upsetting, but I know I'm not the one who's probably affected the most by it.
No. Wow, CeCe. Well, thanks for sharing that with us here on Extreme Genes and with everybody listening. That's pretty powerful stuff, and it's amazing how complex it can get, isn't it?
Yeah, and I tried to make this as succinct as possible. It was actually even more complicated in the entire story than I can tell you.
I would imagine. Well, let's take a break here, and we'll talk about some of your professional work here when we return, coming up in 3 minutes with CeCe Moore on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, back with CeCe Moore on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. And CeCe, I'm still reeling from the story you just told about the surprise in your family. And we need to talk, though, about some of your professional work because you've kind of dovetailed in a new direction because of a change of direction with GEDmatch recently. Let's talk about your work with the Jane and John Does and explain, first of all, what they are to people who might not know.
Sure. So there is somewhere between about 40,000 and 50,000 unidentified deceased individuals in the United States. No one knows the exact number, but there are many, many people that have died without their identities.
Are most of these people murder victims, or are they just folks who maybe died of an accident and were found somewhere? What percentage are what?
It's often difficult to tell, and many of these cases are very old. Some of them definitely look like homicides and can even be confirmed to be homicides, but many more of them, it's unclear. Obviously, if there's a bullet hole or something like that, they know. Some of them, they can see blunt force trauma, but beyond that, it seems to be very difficult to make that determination. Some of these are unidentified victims of serial killers. I've worked on a couple of those. And then it goes all the way to the other end of the spectrum where it looks like somebody was hiking and fell, or was maybe camping and died for some reason, maybe was homeless and passed. But in all of these cases, what they have in common is we don't know who they are, and they have been nameless for years or decades in some of these cases.
So you've been researching criminal work over the last several years, and now you're doing this like on your quote-unquote spare time on the weekends. And, and what's opened it up, though? I mean, where you're able to do more in this type of work, because as I understand it, without GEDmatch's database available, that's kind of been a struggle, hasn't it?
Right. So I've always worked Jane and John Doe cases while I was working suspect cases. It's part of what we do at Parabon. In fact, we have a contract with Oregon State Medical Examiner. And because of that contract, we have dozens and dozens of unidentified decedents or Jane or John Does that we're trying to help Oregon State identify. There's a wonderful medical examiner up there, Dr. Nikki Vance, who cares very much about these cases. She's wanted them solved for her entire career, and she sees the power of genetic genealogy to do that. So we're working really closely together. So I've been working a lot of those cases, still working suspect cases, but because of that contract, I have a constant supply of those. And then the other reason I've been working them so much is because GEDmatch changed their policy on Jane and John Does back in January, where they opened up the whole database to them. Yeah, and I don't know if everyone's aware, but it's made a huge difference for my work, for DNA Doe Project's work, for anyone that's working on these Jane and John Doe cases. Instead of only being able to compare against the opted-in database, which is probably less than 500,000, we can now compare against the whole GEDmatch database, which is closer to 1.5 million.
Wow.
So when I need a break from the extremely difficult suspect cases, I can jump into one of these cases and I have a much better chance of quicker success. So I've been spending my weekends identifying one and sometimes two of these individuals almost every weekend.
That's incredible. And these are provided to you, the information and the DNA from police force out there somewhere?
It's usually a medical examiner, and that's one of the reasons I think that Verigen, that owns GEDmatch, has made this change. I am told that they consulted with some experts in bioethics and came to the conclusion that these cases were not unlike adoption cases, and so they should be allowed to be compared against the whole database. Hopefully your listeners are supportive of that and we're aware of it. But what it has meant is many of these people have been getting their names back finally, and their families have been getting notifications about what happened to them.
So who notifies the families, CeCe, after you identify these people? Is it usually the medical examiner's office?
Sometimes. So each of these people are obviously found in a jurisdiction where an agency might be involved. So although the medical examiner is in charge of them, there may be a law enforcement agency that is involved that then can do the notifications. Some of the cases I'm working, there just isn't anyone else available to do them. And because of my experience dealing with the difficult cases I've dealt with all these years in another setting, I've been entrusted to reach out to some of these families, particularly if there's an adoption situation or something that makes the genealogy or the genetic genealogy a little bit more complex and sensitive. So I actually had a recent case that took me more than a weekend. It was very difficult because it involved Tennessee pedigree collapse.
Oh, dear.
And I didn't know if I was ever going to find this poor guy, a young man, teenager, most likely, very old case. And when I finally got to the family I thought he was from, the immediate family, I found that there was a woman searching for her biological father, who was, I believed, this missing person. So this was a very sensitive situation.
So what has been the reaction of most of those folks who knew that their loved one was missing?
You know, I think so many of them were in denial a bit, hoping that their loved one was just out there living their life, had changed their name, for example, and just hadn't been in touch. And so even if decades had passed, when I've had these conversations with them, they've been devastated. It's always like ripping off a Band-Aid. And so it does take a lot of sensitivity and compassion. And I, often will end up on the phone for 2 hours or so talking to these individuals and then continue to be in touch with them.
And this is your weekend hobby. I mean, that's absolutely amazing.
It's part of my work. I do really enjoy being able to dig into these cases, and the ones where I have more to compare against are obviously more straightforward. Now, that doesn't mean they're always straightforward, but they do come together very nicely. Oftentimes, I'll have 3 or 4 genetic networks that represent each of the grandparents' lines, and so these are really high confidence potential identifications when I write up that report and do the briefing for the agency or the medical examiner. I'm often very confident that this is that person. Some of these cases, I've been fortunate that when I finally get to that family, somebody has marked that person deceased on their family tree and missing. So just recently, last weekend or the weekend before, I had 2 different cases where once I got to that immediate family, which took a lot of time, but once I got there, there was an entry on a public family tree that said missing, presumed dead, or vanished, disappeared. And
wow.
That's very helpful.
So satisfying, isn't it, CeCe, when you make breakthroughs like this, and it never gets old.
Yeah, I mean, it's really helpful because I just worked a case last weekend where I absolutely was sure about who the parents were. I knew they had a daughter that was my missing person, but I couldn't find her name anywhere because she wasn't born in a state that has open birth records. I could see her on someone's tree as private. I was like, why couldn't you just mark it? Because it's so helpful. So if you are building your family tree and you do have a family member out there and they are missing, have been missing for years or decades, it would be great if you would mark that on the tree. And remember, we can't see them if they're living. So if you mark them as deceased but unknown and put a note, that really can help us in our work.
She's CeCe Moore. She's the genetic detective and in more ways than one. And CeCe, it's been way too long. I am so thrilled that you came back on today. And let's get together a little sooner this time around, okay? Next time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, you have a great fall, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. You too.
And David Allen Lambert is coming up next for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss Roots Tech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience Roots Tech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience Roots Tech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com. All right, Genies, the masks are off, libraries and archives are opening up, and in part because of the pandemic, there are more records online than ever before. That means more opportunities for you to discover your ancestors and piece together their stories. Hey, it's Fisher, and if you haven't joined the official Extreme Genes Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies, there's never been a better time. Here's your chance to visit online with like-minded genies. This is the place for exchanging ideas on new sources, databases, DNA, and, well, strategies. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies got a whole bunch of genies through the pandemic and will only be better now that things are opening up. It's a great online community that gets better still when you become a part of it. Remember, sometimes it only takes one tip or idea to get your family research where you want it to go. Since it costs you nothing to sign up, why not join us? Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. All right, we are back for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. And David Allen Lambert has returned. And David, we have a question here from Kathleen Vincent in Murray, Utah. She says, Fisher and Dave, I recently found an ad in a Maryland newspaper where my ancestor said he would no longer pay his wife's bills. There were other similar ads in that paper. Please explain these things, Kathleen.
Oh, yeah. My fifth great-grandfather, David Whitney, a war soldier. He had been married 3 or 4 times, and his fourth wife, he took out an ad in 1789 that says, I forbid all those from trusting my wife Lydia, for she has eloped from my bed and board.
Yeah. And this is a common term we hear, elopement, but it doesn't necessarily mean eloping like to go get married. It means just basically running away from her husband and maybe to somebody else.
Right, exactly. I mean, you don't know if, the circumstances, was he abusive? Did she find somebody else? I mean, the story is never clear. And a lot of these fish, we don't really have divorce records.
Right.
At least in Massachusetts, we find divorces well back into the 1600s, but they don't seem to be commonplace until well after the Revolutionary War. And then by the 19th century, everybody's divorcing left and right. But
it's always interesting when you run into something like that because you wonder, well, why wouldn't they pay the bills? Where'd she go? What happened there? But, this is often a thing that we don't think much about today because you're right. We don't know the circumstances here, and it could be somebody escaping a real brutal relationship.
Oh, yeah. And she could be like staying at a tavern nearby and incurring a bill under his name. And rightfully so. Maybe the person was an abusive husband. We just don't know the details. But I've also seen ads from ladies writing that their husbands have gone out to sea permanently and not on a boat. Like they've just disappeared. It's like, I know that he's with so-and-so. And like they spelled this out in the papers. And this is in the 18th century, early 19th century. They're quite colorful. I always used to chuckle at them until I found that my ancestor, David Whitney, in 1790 was living alone. And I thought to myself, why is he living alone? He got married in 1787. Did his wife die? And then when I found that ad, I'm like, oh, that's why he's alone. She left him. So
yeah, we tend to think these days that we have no privacy like in the old days.
No.
I don't know that there was that much privacy back then.
No, you had your fence viewers. If you did anything on the Sabbath, like went and picked something out of your garden, you'd be called into the church court.
Yep.
So,
and that would be published.
And then you probably sit in the stalks, and that rotten fruit that you never picked would probably be thrown at you.
Ooh.
So,
yeah, so there are a lot of things like that, but that is a really fun ad to find, and it really gets you wondering what's going on there and why. And really all you can ever do is speculate because it's really pretty rare to find something on that. Unless you do find something in a church situation, maybe a police situation, somebody was charged with something, but that's pretty rare on the whole. We also see ads for runaway enslaved individuals and other things.
Right. You can have an apprentice that ran away. And a lot of times people ask about apprenticeship records. I'm like, really? You don't find them unless you break the legal contract. Because handshakes and documents never had to be filed in court. But if they ran away from it after they had their suit of clothes and paycheck, the newspaper will have an ad.
And sometimes you'll even see a church now taking care of a family because a man abandoned the family, like happened with my guy over in England in 1818. They give a full description of him, what he was wearing at the time, how tall he is, what he looks like, his complexion, color of his eyes. It's like, well, this is really useful for me. It's just kind of a shame for the family he left behind. Kathleen, thanks for the question. We'll get another one coming up here when we return with Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, in 3 minutes. All right, final question this week for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, David Allen Lambert over there. And David, this question comes from Rainey Smith in Kansas City, Mo. She writes, hello, I am new to genealogy. I found a 19th century autograph album that was kept by my great-great-grandmother. Do you have any suggestions about how these names can tell me something about my family? Good question, Rainey. Boy, let's get started on this, David.
Oh, let's see. This is a wonderful piece of family history because associate research is where you can really get the most. First off, when was the autograph album done in the 19th century? When your ancestor is in school? Do they look like their signatures of children or versus, say, an adult? Maybe they were a member of like a club.
Well, maybe there's a date on some of them that'll give you an idea.
Right, exactly. And then you start looking at, well, the basic part. Again, you're new to genealogy, so the U.S. Census. So there is no 1890 census to speak of, but say 1880, the 1900. You might start looking at some of these names and seeing geographically where they're in the same vicinity where your family was living, or especially the one that kept the autograph album.
Well, and you might discover that, especially if you get into town histories, that your great-great-grandmother was part of a group or society or association with some of these other people in it, maybe even a church group.
That's true. I actually came across one I bought years ago at a yard sale, and it was early 1900s, but she was a school teacher. I originally thought these were people that she went to school with. No, they were other teachers at the same high school and other teachers that she had dealt with through her life for over 20 years.
Isn't that interesting? You mentioned teachers. I remember going on eBay once and poking around for stuff from my hometown and found a signature in an autograph book from the 1920s of the neighbor that I knew in the 1960s when I was a kid. She was a little old lady. I thought, well, there's Mrs. Parker. How about that? You never know what you're going to run into. Autograph albums tell so much also. It certainly suggests that your ancestor was socially engaged and obviously wanted to remember these people, and she really enjoyed people, and that's helpful there. And you would imagine if they're just ordinary people, that these are associates. It could also be that they were significant people in the town that she was from.
That's true. And, there could be people they went to church with. They may have been in a fraternal organization, or maybe, Daughters of Union Veterans or something like that. It's entirely possible. Sometimes you get clues when they sign their name. Sometimes they put where they were living, or they might have some catchy little piece of poetry. And who knows, you may have a famous signature in there. I love telling the story about the one I bought for $3 because I bought it was a camp up in Maine. The girl had lived in my hometown, and they must have cleaned out the house or something after she died, and it ended up with an antique dealer. Apparently didn't look very well because, as I told you before, tipped in 4 photo corners as a signed card authenticated of Amelia Earhart.
Wow.
Not bad for $3.
$3.
$3.
Well, and here's the thing. As a beginning genealogist, this is just one little tool in helping learn the stories of your ancestors, but it's a good one. So congratulations on that. But also look at the other records as well that might be out there that can paint an even broader picture. So we appreciate the question. And, of course, if you have a question for us, you can always email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com. David, thanks once again. We'll talk to you next week.
I look forward to it.
And thank you for joining us this week. And if you missed any of the show, of course, the amazing surprise revealed by CeCe Moore. If you want to hear it again or you want to share it with a friend, of course, catch the podcast on Apple Media, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, ExtremeGenes.com. We're all over the place. So thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.